तूगताळा जाल वैयारी आनंदमाई तूगताळा जाल वैयारी. As a kid going to that convent school with fancy, everyone's from a business class, and they would go to Disney World, and they would come back with shoes from America, and I'd be like, we sacrificed a goat. It's an archive that lives within my grandmother, because what I draw from her is not just what she knows, is where she comes from, and she's like a time capsule herself. They would walk into each other's house and they'll immediately start singing to each other. "Yen ಮಾಡ್ಲತ್ತಿದೆ, ತಿಂಡಿ ಮಾಡ್ಲಕ್ಕೆ ಏನ್ ಮಾಡ್ಲತ್ತಿದೆ." Like they won't even ask like, what are you making for breakfast? They'll want to sing to each other, I believe. And then at some point you're like, okay, I want to call myself a Madiga, but what does it mean to be Madiga? What does it mean to come from a caste which dealt with leather and cleaning of leather and making of instruments and making of agricultural tools?
Thank you so much, Shilpa, for joining. You are my first guest on Durga Lokam, and so it really means so much for me to have you here. And to view your... Yes?
I'm glad, because I think we spoke on the phone and I really felt like there's a connection with what you're doing and what I'm doing. So I was glad to have this conversation. So thank you.
Thank you, Shilpa. So for viewers who will be watching us, to quickly introduce you, Shilpa is a folk artist. She's a folk practitioner who, I was telling her, she walks the earth like a song with so much wisdom of ancestors flowing through her, and that's why we are having this conversation, to know more about folk and to more about Shilpa and to know more about her journey. And so Shilpa, how are you doing today, and what does it feel like being Shilpa today? So let's start from there.
It feels good to be me today. Days, especially since I've moved to Gulbarga, there's been a sense of purpose. There's a sense of being in a space where there is a lot of dreaming and lot of working. And even though every day there are some troubles, because we're building a house, and I don't think anyone builds a house without any troubles going through it. Everything that you do, how many ever houses you build, there's new learning always along the way. And so there are troubles that come up every day, but there's also this excitement that we've taken this step, so further away from the um, path that was taught to us, which was shown to us, which was proposed to us. So some days it just feels like, what are we doing? But today it feels good. So thank you for asking.
Lovely. So just to share, if you would like to tell us about how did you start this journey? What does folk mean to you? And I know that you're telling me that you are folk, right? So if you can just share about how did it all started, your journey with folk?
Yeah, I think I don't know if there's a beginning to this journey. I think there was always this part of our household, like my grandmother or my father, and his inclination to be connected to his village. And so he didn't really take us out for too many summer holidays, but he would take us back to the village. And though as children we didn't like it, there was always these roots which were very strong in the house, which were slowly being lost, even to us being in a convent school, living in an urban society, being ashamed of our humble roots, because you're in a space where there is so much prominence on class. So I think I grew up kind of being embarrassed of where we came from, as a kid going to that convent school with fancy, everyone's from a business class, and they would go to Disney World, and they would come back with shoes from America, and I'd be like, we sacrificed a goat. Always this parallel world that I think always stood beside me, and I've gained from it, but I wasn't consciously drawing from it. And so when I started going back to being a when I started being a documentary filmmaker, I studied in Australia, I came back, and my interest was not in fiction, it was in documentaries, because I just felt when we were in a land in we were shooting documentaries in Australia, I used to feel there is so much need. We as people who are from developed countries, or we've left behind these agrarian ritualistic roots, quite often find ourselves very disenfranchised, very disconnected to who we are. Where is that continuity of my ancestry, or where we come from, and why we should assert and what we should assert, and that becomes very muddled, isn't it? Because we
So,
just feel like, yeah, I'm a person from Ganganagar in Bangalore and who pays 22,000 rupees rent. That becomes your identity after some time. So I think, um, even though I was happy with what I was doing as a documentary filmmaker, what it did is it drew me back to that world. That has A part of it has been in my household, a part of it has been, it's an archive that lives within my grandmother, because she what I draw from her is not just what she knows, is where she comes from, and she's like a time capsule herself. Like, everything that she says,
yes.
enlightens me on a daily basis. So that journey has always been there, but I caught on to it and I said, okay, this is what I want to commit myself to. After I did a lot of vagabonding, like I did documentary films, and then I was documenting, and from documenting, I started to understand how even documentation comes with a certain power structure, right? I just feel like it's a complicated dynamic that started building. Like, I didn't know whether I wanted to practice this or observe it or watch it. Like, that started happening as a filmmaker. And so I went back to my theater practice. Like, I was a part of some theater groups when I was in college, and I helped. I was a volunteer when Rang Shankara first started in
Mhm.
Bangalore. So I went back and I started to look at admin work and how can we try and sustain theater, and what why should we sustain theater. And honestly, within city contemporary theater, I really felt like there were very few reasons that made me feel connected to it. There was something lacking. The narratives were lacking, even in mainstream cinema or in media. Be it about this Dalit narrative, which comes, these marginalized narratives that come from a certain caste section, or for that matter, even tribal narratives. These were narratives that excited me in terms of it helped us know the diversity of our land, right? When you realize that there is a different practice just 20 kilometers away, the same practice is followed a different way, a certain in a certain place, you realize you can see it as lack of unity, but you can also see it as this immense diversity, which an autonomy which you hold over every ritual that you practice. The
Absolutely.
practitioner actually has the right over what that practice needs to be and what the trajectory of that practice needs to be. So over time, I think once I started working, documenting Yalama's art forms and meeting the artists. The instrument, I think, was crazy. I think it we started obsessing over it. It was an extremely magical set of instruments, and so we were like, we've got to have at least a pair. I know we are documenting, but maybe we need to have a pair. Maybe we need to start playing. And I'm telling you, like, it sucked us into the art form. Like, the instrument sucked us in. We started playing, and then those were the songs that we would play, and then we realized it's just two people cannot play these songs. These songs are meant to be sung with people. That's when folk is created. Just because I drew a song from somewhere and now record it as a recording artist, it doesn't become folk. Folk is something that needs to weave that community bonding, that needs to keep that engagement going. So over time, I think even as a performer, my head started spinning. From Rang Shankara, then I went on to being with Indian Ostrom Theatre, which is a theatre in Pondicherry, and I had a Franco Tamil theatre who was also kind of, I think, dealing with that narrative, being half French, being half Tamil, and trying to bridge these two worlds. And quite often, then you realize how much of a hybrid you are. How many worlds actually live within you, and how are you going to connect these worlds? You don't want to give either up, because so much of your identity has to deal with them. But then one you have shunned for some time, and maybe you want to reroute. You want to find what it is that connects you. Like, what do you mean my caste identity? If you grew up in a convent school, you did not go through any discrimination. You weren't even given your caste certificate because you don't really need it. Um and and then at some point you're like, okay, I want to call myself a Madiga, but what does it mean to be Madiga? What does it mean to come from a caste which dealt with leather and cleaning of leather and making of instruments and making of agricultural tools? What does it, how did we as a community connect to the larger community, right? So I think that is what I started finding within folk. And then I think everything is history. How else do I put it? But because we kind of went through the journey, we said we'll travel, we'll live in their houses, we'll see that it's not a folk art form that I can draw from the Jogatis. The Jogatis live their entire day, the way they dress, from what they eat and where they busk and how they busk. Their entire livelihood is that belief and faith. It's not how we as people from developed spaces or civilized spaces detach from ourselves. We go to the church and we do this, and then we go to a performance space, I pay my ticket and I watch art, and then I come home and listen to my podcast, and then I will cook organic, I'll make my vegan meal and I'll have it. It's insane, like how compartmentalized we've made our lives. And when you move to the village and you see that art is not different from life, shit is not different from food.
Absolutely.
everything everything is linked.
Mhm.
And what it does is just naturally, simplistically, holistically, with simple stories and songs, just keeps it all bound together in your body,
Absolutely.
in your mind, in your gods. Your gods start reflecting you, you start reflecting your gods. And that's, it's not happening because you've decided, okay, I have in my daily routine 3 days that I'm going to do this
Yes.
this particular
Puja.
puja. And it's not that it's just, it's moving. It's like a collective dream. I think that's where I really got stuck with being I mean, trying to understand that I'm not an observer of folk. If I have to do anything, I have to be a practitioner. I have to look at it in terms of what is the trajectory through me, rather than me trying to be someone who's trying to make it into a museum format. Because somewhere, some artist has told me that the Devi is singing through me. And the day I started believing it, and then I started realizing you can't be an atheist, you can't be, you can't be a non-believer when you're doing something which is creating that faith, creating that hope, and radiating that difference. And then you're like, no, I actually own it now. I'm not on the wall anymore. I'm not agnostic. I'm not atheist. I'm a believer. I understand it. It's working through my body. It's different. It's a personal journey. What you're going through is through travel, and what I'm going through is through the songs that I'm finding of my land. All of us have to just practice that divine feminine energy through us, and we have to really own it. I think that's where the problem comes, where we've been told to be a certain way, and get a certain job and have these many kids, and it becomes so automated. Even if it's the right thing for you to do, you're really not enjoying the journey. You're really not feeling like, oh my god, there is creation happening through me, and now
True.
I'm like the curator of my life and these children and the community around me. I feel that when I see farming women, when we travel and Adi and I land up in a household, it's that power they enjoy to be able to share that meal with someone.
Yeah. Absolutely.
If you were to randomly come home today, I'll be like, oh my god, I'll have to order from outside. I don't even know how to be that person who feels joy in like making a meal and feeding people. I want to return to that. Like, and this is where we are. I mean, frankly speaking, not a clue as to what the practice actually is, but just embodying and living and listening and sharing, and just being. I think that's where I think we're finding the joy in. Like,
That was a great sharing, Shilpa. Thank you so much. And for being honest and saying that you're still figuring out and it's a long journey, and how you made it from wanting to preserve folk to being a practitioner and living the folk yourself, right? And having explorations through that. And, it's such a personal and beautiful journey. And to be coming out and sharing that with us is awesome. And so what is it like connecting with a goddess? Both way, you can share like spiritually, how do you feel
yeah,
her? Which goddess, maybe Yellama deity, what does she feel like? What is her energy like when it flows through you? And
yeah.
secondly, in a political way also, if you want to share that, if there is a political change and movement happening. So if you can share something about that.
Definitely, definitely. I think it, it's a lovely question. Actually, I don't think anyone's asked me that, and just trying to answer that question, I think a lot of things are going off in my brain. So I think it is. I'm a very political person. I come from a social activism space and then a documentary space, and then when Vemula passed away, when he committed suicide, I think within Andhra and within the student body across India, there was like an uproar. It was a kind of a coming to terms with what I was trying to ignore or what I was trying to almost forget. And this is something that's happened from a previous generation. The middle class or upper middle class Dalits try and move away from their culture because of that embarrassment of being connected to a deity whose rituals include a sacrifice or a buffalo sacrifice or things like that. So I feel like generally their expectations or our older generation wanted to use the Ambedkar way and kind of move away from anything that was Vedic or Tantric or anything, but any symbol of the past, and it's a highly non-feminine narratives that have come up, right? So looking at it historically, we understand that we come from a space. This whole South Indian space is a mother goddess region. It's a region very strong, full of mother goddesses, and over time we've had Vaishnavism or Shaivism or Vaishnavism or Jainism, Buddhism, all of these, and then the Brahmanical values and the colonizers, and you have layers of this. Even through the Bhakti movement, sometimes there were quite patriarchal narratives that were being presented. So generally, I think this mother goddess region and her ideology and her power over her people, not just women, has been subdued over time. So I felt interested to mainly reclaim that, reclaim that we are a region where we were strong matriarchally. you know. We come from a region of sound women where we took up the lead in our families and led ourselves financially, politically, so socially. We stood ground. And that's what we need to, when you go back, you needed to reconcile with that. Feminism is not something that you have to come up with a new vocabulary today and collectivize today and move forward, but it's a journey that's been happening for so many years. And that's what
Yes.
Renuka's story tells us. When she lands up cutting, Parshurama has killed Kartiviraja in this version of Yellama's story, and she says after her head gets cut off, Parshurama cannot come to. He doesn't have closure that he's killed his own mother, so he brings her back. And when she brings her back, there are several versions, and honestly, the number of layers of history you can tell how patriarchal the ending is. So, a lot of endings of her story in this region are Jamadagni and Renuka get back together, and Parshurama is very happy, like Hanuman, he's sitting by their feet, and both of them, like Rama and Sita, are sitting together. How that extremely demented marriage worked out, we have no clue. There is no closure for that. But
Yes.
there are versions which suggest that after she came back, she had her senses. She's Renuka 2.0. She's become wise. And she looks at Jamadagni and she says, Jamadagni, I'm done with you. You never wanted to get married to me. You please find your own way. I'm going to go my own way. She tells Parshurama, you've cut down so many heads. He tries to behead her. And because Shiva is with her, he beheads her many times. So there are mounds of her heads lying next to her. So she says to Parshurama, take each of these heads and fling them in every direction. Wherever they fall, there will be a Devi like me. She'll be born, she'll speak another language, but they're all me and I am them. This will keep going on.
Good.
So she says that, and then she goes back to Saudatti, where this huge massacre has happened and this king is dead. So she takes Kartivi Raja's body, which is dismembered, and because his wives are saying, please bring back our husband, we don't have any identity without him. So she says, hold on, don't lose faith, don't lose hope. And she makes the instrument out of him. So this is Kartiviraja's head. This is his head, and this is his forearm, and that string is his intestine. This is his thigh bone. This is his thumb. And this is the skin on his back that's been removed. I mean, this is his rib cage, by the way. So she makes an instrument out of this man's body and she gives it to the wives and she says, "You do not have to be anybody's dasis. Be my dasis. Carry these. Find your pairs. Find your sisterhood and travel. Be.
Just
Sing
be.
my songs. Just be." So no matter what class you are, caste you are, you have the right to walk out with these instruments. So Devdasi system may have come again through those layers of history. It has become a way of subjugating women and turning them into prostitutes. But let's not forget that it starts off as a women's liberation movement. It starts off as a space, as a refuge for women to be, not
Mm.
be stuck as a upper caste woman, and hence you can't show your face outside. You're a lower caste woman, so you get raped and you keep quiet. So you do not belong in these boxes. You can walk out of the house. So I think for me, politically, as a feminist, as an activist, the story just became like this ultimate tool, you know. And when I started telling the story and when I started singing the songs, mainly when I started singing the songs, there was this moment. One day, I had a couple of students who had come from Shrishti, I think, and one of my friends. They were all sitting and wearing their shoes, and I gave them the Shruti and Chaudaki and asked them to try. So we were all playing the Shruti and Chaudaki. And some women heard us. They looked like women from North Karnataka, but they were in Kaban Park. And they were walking around. They heard us. They were all peeping from behind the trees and bushes. We called them and asked them to sit down. And so they came and they saw us and they were like such weird girls. Like they're sitting and wearing their shoes. They're holding Shruti and Chaudaki. They're begging instruments. So I wonder what, they were curious and we wanted to impress them, so we kept playing and like one more song and one more song, remember this song, that song. So whoever knew the songs we were singing, and after the singing we went and struck up a conversation. It turned out that the Anganwadi workers in Karnataka were on a strike for 3 days and they were sleeping on the pavement in Vidhan Sauda, which is right behind Kaban Park. So they heard us and they came, and we felt really bad, of course, because there was really not much we could have done for the chief minister to hear them out. um, but we said, okay, let's go have breakfast. We'll buy you some tea. We'll go have breakfast. And they were like, "Badri, hangela madangil." Like, don't say such things. Since you have played these songs, the Yellamma songs, you got Yellamma to our fight. So they put their hands into their blouses and dug up like some 5-10 rupees, and everybody, like there were two Muslim women in them, even then they pulled out money and they put it in my chaudki. So if you see in my Shruti and Chaudki, there's always money.
Oh.
And that's when you realize, right? For me, it might be just like a new skill as an actor or as a vocalist. I'm picking up something new, but for them, it was faith. It was hope for them. Slowly, I think, even though it was a political tool for me as an artist, I was like, yeah, this is the story I want to tell. This is the story we have to bring up because it's subversive. It has this Dalit narrative. It talks about caste. It talks about gender. It talks about sexuality, and it's not something that it's not too far fetched. If Renuka is the person who's the protagonist of this story, we have to do justice by her and not play into narratives that don't play by her actually. Ultimately what happens is she becomes a servant of Jamadagni. She goes back, she's like, I'll wash her feet every day. No. No, that's how you I felt telling the story in that sense. I started off doing that, and there was some strange instances that kind of gave us a little more of a jolt that this is not just a story. We are going into this story. We are changing with this story, and something is happening. There was a time where we did this Renuka story in Coimbatore, and these were medical students. They had just finished, I think their classes. Just hardly half an hour break they had. They all came in, and when we were singing a song, one of the girls got possessed, and then I was like, I don't know what to do.
Oh God.
I don't know what to do because when in the village people get possessed, what happens is the priest comes out with the bhandar, which is basically that mixture of turmeric and vermilion. It's like a bright orange powder, and they come and they smear it over the women's head, and then they just open her hair up. They open her hair up, and if she has any loose sari or dupatta or anything, they just tie it up tightly. So in case she's going to get up and start losing it, she has the freedom to do so, and she's not
Mm.
going to have clothes falling off her. And I immediately kind of cut down the song and I stopped singing. I didn't know what to do. I felt so. See, I saw her, and she had just started tripping, and I was like, okay, I because I don't know the process, and I really haven't paid attention, and that's when I was really pushed to think, yeah, there is some movement. It's every time you see a possession, I started to notice it more and more, even when there is an actor, as in terms of a person who embodies that same spirit again and again, like in Bhutakola or Theya. Sometimes we lose people because they couldn't come back to reality, and it's happened. It's not uncommon knowledge. Like, if you just walk around in these regions and you ask people, there have been kolas who have fallen into the well and died, right? Or Theyams that have walked into the fire and deceased. That's it. You don't know if an actor died or a spirit died. Like, it's an insane moment to think what it is that we embody sometimes. I think that's when it's slowly, I don't know when really it started changing. When we started telling the story, there was more emotion to it. There was
Mm.
more need to embody her and her pain, right? So it's insane, because I think as actors we go through it. We even read about it. We've heard about who's that director, I think it's Stanislavski, some directors in Europe who have gone into experimentation, working with one actor for a long time, trying to embody something in one body, right? I think that's what we do naturally within the folk realm. We're not trying to be practitioners of art, but we're embodying those rituals and those practices in our life, in our daily living. So then the question started to become, is it important for us to be in proscenium and perform to an audience? Or
Mm.
is it important to sing, or is it more satisfying? Not important, but is it
Yes,
more satisfying to sing to that farmer who has to stay up all night and make your grain for you?
mm.
Is that song more meaningful then, because you've built that bridge towards your food, towards the people you feed? You've done something else altogether there. Yeah, yeah.
It's such a deep level work. It's about you, how your singing impacts the people around you. When it comes to the communities who are practicing it, right? So they are also working. So their faith, in the sense, it's a very natural process for them to work with the spirit, right? So
Right,
it's
right.
more of a channeling the spirit than just singing a song. That's why when they sing, it's added intertwined with their daily chores. How art was such a everyday thing for us, and from there we
Right.
have moved out. And so in that sense, one is like, is your movement reclaiming art also a part of reclaiming yourself?
Huh.
If you have a song which
Right,
can explain the.
right. So, I'll start off by addressing a few things. One is, I don't know if my work is um, really reclaiming anything. Sometimes I feel I do suffer from feeling like an imposter, and people feeling like I'm appropriating something that's not mine, and it makes me doubt where this work is going. And quite often, when I get a lot of calls from religious institutions and saying that when they say, yeah, Renuka speaks through you, I just feel the whole thing becomes very dodgy. I'm not really sure I'm provoking people enough.
Mm.
so um, so the idea is, I think when I started looking at giving when I started singing folk songs with others, it was mainly to excite people to the idea that all of us have some amount of musical background in all our lives. If it's not in your lifetime, it's in your grandmother's or their, and somewhere the bridge kind of is broken. So there needs to be more of us, not just one or two of us, to go out and just look beyond that um, playlist that you have on your Spotify or Apple Music or anything. Look beyond that to see live music around you that is connected to your community somehow. um, a lot of people think that I'm mainly an activist and I'm trying to use this music to start building some sort of propaganda around Ambedkarism, or to start a new kind of Dalit revolution. I actually feel like that's a compliment. Thank you very much. But it's not one person that can start a Dalit revolution. I see it very strong, like when I see someone like Sheetal Sathe in Maharashtra, or when I see someone like Gadar in Andhra. Now, those guys, yeah, I mean, they've reached some heights. They have fought for people's voices. They've been in that space for a very long time. But I don't see myself in that political space in that sense either. I think I'm more interested in looking at diversity, how that diversity is so precious to us, that's so unique to us. You come to this region and you notice that our religion within the, I mean, I don't even think religion is a concept really. You have more community and community identities. So here the Muslim identity and the Madiga identity are intertwined in many ways. Like my grandmother's side, my grandfather's cousin brother is called Ismail. His father was called Hussein Appa. And so you have, so what happens is every village, if you look at it as a concentric circles of engagement, you have the richest and the upper class and the upper caste who live right in the middle, around the temples. Now, depending on whose temple it is, you can say a lot about who owns that village in that sense, which community. And then around it are the functional people who, are goldsmiths and silversmiths and blacksmiths. And then as you get to the peripheries, you will see people who are the Holiyas and the Madigas, who are the last two castes, people who are dealing with leather and people who are dealing with shit. And then you have the Muslims. Yeah, then there are definitely circles beyond it. Like there are thandas, which are gypsy thandas, who decided not to be the eccentric circle around it, but just like a satellite town. Most cases here, the satellite towns are bigger than the village, mind you, right now. The thandas are much bigger than the village, which it started off drawing from. But these are interesting because most of these, the understanding of this kind of folk connections to social political connections of folk, right, make you give you a better understanding of how we were connected to the rest of the society. So even now, when Moharram happens in this region, the house that the first coal, like there's a big pit of fire out onto which all the gods walk out. So the young boys carry the gods. The gods have a panja. The peers have a panja. So they'll pull out that symbol and they'll carry it out and they'll walk over that fire. That fire, the first coal has to come from our household, from the Madiga households. And when we sacrifice a goat or we sacrifice even a chicken, we have to call the mullah uncle from the dargah. Like they have to, say something in Persian to that, convince the goat to be sacrificed, and then we sacrifice the goat. So generally, I think this is what I'm interested in. My whole idea why we have to continue investing in folk is to build this idea of diversity, not to look at it as a lower caste thing or an upper caste thing. Or yes, there is folk within upper caste and lower caste. There is folk within Vedic ideas, which have Vedic ideas, and some that have tantric ideas, that have fire ideas and water ideas there. But it's more important to realize that we will get disenfranchised if we leave all of them behind and put them in one box called folk. The problem with this word folk itself begins from there, isn't it? Everything that wants to be sidelined is folk, actually. Everything is not going to make that trajectory of becoming an institution and then having a kalakshetra of its own or some sort of, unless that happens, a folk form cannot jump out of being folk. Now, what's happening with Yakshagana in our own lifetime is very interesting, because it's making that transition in our very own lifetime right now. Institutions are coming up. There are schools that are being formed. There is a way of initiating into that, no matter what caste or class you are. Yeah, that community, it's drawn further and further away from its ritualistic and community roots. Not all folk farms are going to have this trajectory, mainly because the communities that practice it are not happy practicing it. The youngsters do not want to pick up their father's instruments. They rather listen to EDM. They rather listen to digital music that's coming through movies and television. Commercial music has taken over just the idea of music in such a way that live music, just you and me singing, is uncommon. If both of us stood at a bus stop and decided to sing, like how my grandmother would speak to her friend. They would walk into each other's house and they'll immediately start singing to each other. "Yen nangi yen ಮಾಡ್ಲತ್ತಿದೆ, ತಿಂಡಿ ಮಾಡ್ಲಕ್ಕೆ ಏನ್ ಮಾಡ್ಲತ್ತಿದೆ." Like they won't even ask like, what are you making for breakfast? They'll want to sing to each other, I believe. It's so simple. It comes as simple as speech for them. So I just felt, now that is interesting, right? Women in the village who constantly sing, and they use their voice for singing and speaking, prosody in both. Like, it's amazing. But they don't really stand out and feel like claiming to be an artist, because that again is another section that you're creating. That again is another section in your mind that you're creating. My grandma had no such sections in her mind. She's like, there is a wedding in the house, obviously you have to sing. Like, there's no two ways about it. So why they seem like irritating nannies is because they go around grumbling all the time, saying that you are not doing the right things. Of course we're not doing the right things, because you've moved to the city. Now suddenly there's a Brahmin priest in our wedding ceremonies, which we never had 2 generations ago. And now there is a big rangoli, there is a homa happening. There is no place for women to come together and sing and be the masters of the ceremony anymore. There is again a male priest who's coming and doing that for you. You have justified it. Now you will do a Satnarayan puja and you won't do a Yalamanata. Yalamanata also had a practical purpose, right? Now you're inviting people from 3-4 villages, they've all turned up, and now your daughter is having an affair. So instead of letting everyone gossip all over town and overnight, you're going to put a play. You let everyone watch the play overnight, and then they go home happy. Oh, very nice actors, very good. There are reasons why certain rituals came about a certain way, and we don't, at least I don't know how you and I think about it now, but 5-6 years ago, for me, they were just rituals that meant they were like obligatory. Like, you had to turn up, you had to wear that thread, you had to sit through it. No one was interested in sitting through that Satnarayan puja. But Satnarayan's story, no, ultimately, if I stop being political, I'm just looking at it as a storytelling session. How well you can do that, yeah. It's a Satnarayan puja, no. Tell the story. I think that itself will make people embody Satnarayana. Just sing it to me. Just say it in a language that I know. Right? There is that conflict of language that we need to break so often. Even in proscenium, Renuka will be like, Swami, Tande, yen martiddi Tande. There'll be so much of respect. You will never relate to her. But the minute you see one good folk artist in the village, she'll be like, ha, yen ಮಾಡ್ಲತ್ತೀರಿ? ನನಗ ಭಾರಿ ಇಷ್ಟ ಆಗ್ತೀರಿ ನೀವು. Like, she's a trans woman, but she's embodying how we hit on each other in the village. Like, so that is more real, obviously, than Swami, please marry me, Swami, which is like a 20s heroine.
How a woman is supposed to look through patriarchal eyes, right? So that kind of runs through all the narrations, and the women are being made to into something which is more sacrificial all the time. And it's not that, even there are women who embody such Sita, or people like Meera, but it comes from a more sacred, more balanced space, not like how they are shown to be in very codependent relationship.
Generally, my husband keeps saying, once in a while, we landed up in a space. I mean, I don't think I should name the space. It might become extremely controversial, but we found the crowd there extremely old school, patriarchal, well-funded institution. They were not reacting to the story. And for our good fortune, there was a workshop or something, so there were a lot of kids. So we had that hall so divided, I can't explain to you. Like, there was a whole section who were sitting like this with their classes and their namas and all of that, and they were just not giving me any reaction. And the kids were like, "Yeah, wow!" and hooting and screaming, and this is so insane. I mean, this is what we have to actually study as to why there is such a generation gap. Why, as the if you see yourself as a parent, or if you see yourself as an elder of a community, why is it not our responsibility to look at curation of our own cultural identity, and how we do that? Where are we taking it? Are we taking it to a divisive space? Are we taking it to a space of novelty? are we turning ourselves into tourist attractions, or really?
Absolutely
It's
true.
really like a question that we need to ask, as we, I mean, now I'm in a space where I have sister, and now I have nieces, and when I see them, I'm constantly thinking, what are they going to be? How are they going to be, like, what is, there'll be stupid words thrown at them like Bharatiya Nari and Bharatiya culture, and how are they going to define
Relate
these
to.
things? And like, what are they going to relate to? Or are we just training our kids to make sure they speak good English, go to
Mm.
an international school, and live abroad for the rest of their lives and don't have to deal with this muck? Are we still following that pattern? Like, I know my parents were trying to follow that pattern. They sent us to Australia. They sent my sister to Edinburgh. They really wanted us to find husbands there and never have to come back. But now they have to deal with the extra trauma that our families, our communities are the ones who are subjugated to this Devdasi system. And now my daughter wants to hold on to Devdasi instruments.
Mm.
That trauma that they had to go through for some
Okay.
time, till I think they started to feel like, no, I think she's doing something more political, and something else altogether. But it took some time for them to realize that. I know my dad definitely did not like seeing me with these instruments,
Mm.
but there is that stigma. These instruments itself are untouchable, and that
Yeah,
again gives you more of a push that you have to reclaim them. You know,
absolutely.
queer children today don't need to be jogatis. They don't
Mm.
need to be a part of any religious sect to own their queerness. There is the government, and there are people and communities also standing up in many
Mm.
spaces to say, okay, yeah, queer people need to be whoever they want to be. Now, jogatis, if as a system dies out, who's going to hold on to these instruments?
Mm.
So I don't want to use the word endangered and they're dying. No, it's still quite popular and people still use them.
Mm.
But you do definitely see that they are depreciating in number. The
Mm.
making of these instruments have stopped. People
Mm.
are making chaudkis and shrutis out of plastic pipes.
Mm.
I'm using something with a guitar string,
Mm.
and my chaudki is made of a badminton racket wire.
Okay.
This is what
Mm.
starts to happen when you don't really have the making of the instrument, and there
Mm.
is, everyone's free to make it however they feel like. Yes, you
Mm.
will find some very interesting versions of it, like
Mm.
say the fiber halgi or the tamte
Mm.
is a wonderful instrument. They don't really have to wait for fire or heat up that leather, or it's like a fast food piece. Yeah,
Mm.
you pick up that fiber tamte, you can play whenever. But
Mm.
we as urbanites, we will go based on aesthetics and originality and authenticity, not practicality. And
Practical, right?
yeah,
Absolutely.
definitely. We'll see someone come with a fiber tamte and we'll be like, oh, you don't have a leather tamte? Like, oh, those things, oh,
Yes.
oh, like, yeah, you are responsible to keep it alive and you've stopped using it. So, alas.
Yes. One thing which came very strongly while you were saying this is like it was more tougher, I think, the generations before us to, claim what their truth, their spirituality, their music. And somewhere I think now we are in a space where we don't have to fear that and we won't be burnt like bitches to be yourself or to embody that
That's
embody that power within. Even for me to just come out and do this vlog because I'm such a shy person, I think it was a push. You need to be seen now. Now is the time, and we cannot still hold on to the fear which was so old, and that was real at that time. But right now,
right.
it feels like there's more community of women coming up and owning up their own roots. So how can
Right.
we, just be there and to be there in our own power, nothing else, as you said, just figuring out whatever it is
Yeah.
and being vulnerable and being out there and figuring out, so.
I'd like to, it's in that song. I'll sing you this song. बारे नन्न रतना भरम पूर वचना बारे नन्न रतना भरम पूर वचना. This is a grain pounding song. So they have two big sticks and they go at the grain. And this is what it means, like what you just described. You become a space for more people to come and share your experience. Whoever's journeying past, be a space, be a tree, be a shade, be a glass of water, be a plate full of food, and that's mostly what we can be. This one says, Changati hadili chenda mayina mara gundada sota gili hinda tayava bare nanna ratana bharma pura vachana. Changati is that place that a lot of Dalit children, they are taken to this Ismail Khadri Dargah for their first tonsure, where they do their first chaura, the hairs, they the first balding. So on the way to Chengti, there are mango trees, and these mango trees look like marigold flowers, the shape of marigold flowers. Changati hadili chendamaina mara, and there is also a pond right next to these trees. Gundada suta gili hinda tayava bare nanna ratana bharma pura vachana. There is a pond, and around this pond there is a whole group of parrots. So she continues to say, Gundada suta gili hinda tayava Nari ninna sota swasadyara hadadava bare nanna ratana bharma pura vachana. So she says, just like that pond that has parrots, it's a space for parrots to breed, to live. You be that pond, you be that woman, a house full of daughters-in-law. It's also indirectly saying have a lot of sons, but it doesn't mean be an oasis for them. Varenanna ratana bharma pura vachana. Varenanna ratana bharma pura vachana. This one is about sustenance. So she says, Kuta kututana kubsa kedali hoda. I went to pound grain so that I can buy a blouse for myself. So I can get a blouse to clothe myself. Kuta kututana kubsa kedali hoda. Kyata mari kalavi nori valla tayava vare nanna ratana bharma pura vachana. She says, I went to ask for a blouse, but this grain is so bad, it's so old that it's not breaking. So, Kuta kututana kubsa kelali hoda kyata mari kalavi nori valla tayava bare nanna ratana bharma pura vachana. Kyata mari kalavi nori valla tayava Kyata mari kalavi nori valla tayava katta khalve sastyara kotali kathayava bare nanna ratana bharma pura vachana. This grain is so bad, it is not going to break. Will you please send me those daughters-in-law so they can come and help me break this grain, get a blouse. ಎಲ್ಲ ದೇವರ ಗುಡಿಯ ಕಲ್ಲಿಲಿ ಮುಗದಾವ ಭಲ್ಲೆ ಮೂಡಬಿಯ ಬಾಲ ಭೀಮ ತಂಗ್ಯವ್ವ ಬಾರೆ ನನ್ನ ರತನ ಭರಮ ಪೂರ ವಚನ. ಭಲ್ಲೆ ಮೂಡಬಿಯ ಎಲ್ಲ ದೇವರ ಗುಡಿಯ ಕಲ್ಲಿಲಿ ಮುಗದಾವ. All the temples here seem to be doing one big namaste with their gopurams. You know how it looks like those slightly sharper stupas look like a namaste like this. Bhalle muda biya bala bhima tangyava. Bala bhima is your bala bhima from Mahabharata, or it can be Hanuman, or it can be your own child that you're referring to. They're all doing namaste to this Hanuman, this baby Bhim, who is in your courtyard either eating mud or like rolling around, whatever. So Mudbi again is a space that is geotagged into the song. That's why it's either geotagged by my grandmother or it's been in Mudbi for a long time, and hence Mudbi has gone into the song. But the women were always, fairly capable of replacing names, they never felt like, oh, they're damaging somebody else's song, because the song travels, song is nobody's, the tune is nobody's. So generally, if she hears a song or if she hears a tune, even if it's not in her language, she is able to take that tune and add her own old lyrics and make a new song, which we find difficult because we don't think like that. So this song is basically that. Bare Nanna Ratana, come my sister, or Ratana is like come my pearl, or come my diamond. That's what she's saying. Come my Ratana, Bare Nanna Ratana, Bharma Pura Vachana. Let's sing the true word. Let's sing the true word. Whatever is true, let's sing it. ಬಾರ ನನ್ನ ರತನ ಭರಮಪುರ ವಚನ, ಬಾರ ನನ್ನ ರತನ ಭರಮಪುರ ವಚನ. This is obviously not sung with an instrument like this, so the string gives it another feel. But if you have the vanake, that's basically the big long sticks that are helping to grind. That's what determines the tempo. It might be ಬಾರ ನನ್ನ ರತನ ಭರಮಪುರ ವಚನ, bare nanna. So, or it might be light vanakes. Bare nanna ratana bharamapura vajana, bare nanna ratana bharamapura. And also when you sing sitting like this, it's a very privileged, relaxed way of sitting and singing. This way, for the sake of singing, so to speak.
Yeah.
and those women don't do that. That's why it doesn't flow this way. Bare nanna ratana is so much more softened, but if you were actually doing the job, it would be much more nasal. That's what my study has been also about, is to look at voice as a lens to see what is happening with the song, with what are they trying to say, where does this timbre come from. So if you hear them sing, they'll go bare nanna ratana bharamapura vachana, bare nanna, very dry timbres and lots of nasal sounds, because it takes off the stress on your throat. It's quite simple. Basically, it removes the stress of your throat, and you can use the same air for doing other activities that your body does. You don't need to waste it so much in sounding sexy,
Yeah. So it's not from the gut, is it? Is it not taken from the gut?
It is. So when they move also, bare nanna ratana bharamapur, it's very much, even the way the song is composed, it's usually built on that breath work. The breath work that suits that work.
Yeah.
So usually every kind of singing requires a certain kind of breath work. Like every kind of activity in your body requires a certain kind of breath work. So these songs are actually not built on the breath work that the prose requires, but it's built on what the body requires for that action. That's why when you sing it, when you're doing the job, you're singing it, you're going to feel completely different. You're going to sound completely different.
True.
So generally, when I even sing these songs, I let people know these are folk songs, but they're not being sung, the folk. They're practiced as folk songs. Now we're taking them out, and now, yes, of course, now these are for everyone to use, and there is no copyright for it. And I hope you change it into Tamil, French, whatever it is, and move on to doing wonderful things with it. Because I'm not going to be an institution to manage where this music goes, or the trajectory of this music, or for that matter, feel like the person who needs to guide it in the first place. You guide it through your art practice, and you believe every word you say, or it's a word that's like a given word. Like instead of believing that God gave it to you, your father gave it to you. The practitioner you want it gave it to you, and because you have had no intention to change it, you will hold on to it till there is another practitioner who will want to change it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it will also evolve based on the time and the timelines, the space a person is in,
and what's happening in the world, right? Like the next time I'm going to tell Renuka's story, she's going to be affected with COVID now. She'll be affected with not chickenpox, not leprosy, but she'll be affected with COVID. Even in the story that happens, she's an untouchable person, and untouchable basically now has translated to social distancing. So
one thing which came in when we were singing, Shilpa, was the healing element of it. How these rituals, in a way. So now we need, like, all these modern day things which we face, but with something which is so traditional, like a folk performance, which is ritualistic, where we are moving with the rhythm, breath work, music, holding hands, a
Yeah,
sense of community. It was so natural that there was no need for us to do a shadow work there. We didn't have to.
right.
We live in so much trauma in that way. I mean, the traditions might have had their own thing of fixed thinking and all of that, but practices like this allowed their bodies and minds and soul to be more present where they are, and also heal themselves. So how, like, if you can put in, more, throw more light at the healing element of this entire practice.
I think when you're looking at most of these domestic songs, why they were in need in the first place is because human work intervention within agriculture was such a hard piece of labor that you
Mm,
have to conduct, and your body doesn't fare very well if you didn't have the right technique, or if you didn't have the right tempo, or if you didn't have the right intention, even for that matter.
mm,
Someone who did not work on the farm or did not want to work on the farm, to push them to do so. So, song music, I think domestic folk songs which came about, which are either, the rice paddy field songs, or the de-weeding songs, harvest songs. So, when you're looking, especially with these pounding,
mm.
grinding, work songs generally fell off the planet, or they stopped getting used because the grinding stone went away and a mixer came, and a mixer's too loud to sing over. Like, you know, there was a harvest. There was a harvest machine. If you've heard it, it's very very loud. Your entire 1 acre is just a one big
Big.
buzz. You
Mm,
can't sing over a harvest machine, but you can sing over a harvest. So music had a reason, I think, where I mean, it was practically used in such a way that it kept
mm,
people awake when it needed to keep people awake. It gave people rhythm, so people's hands didn't get smashed. Like when you're doing
mm.
those tall stick pounding, there's usually one person sitting on the bottom and clearing.
Clearing, correct.
So if you don't have a sense of rhythm, and if you don't have a song that's giving everyone a sense of rhythm, that this is my timing, that is her timing, that is her timing, you could lose fingers. In that sense, it also was a way to keep people's timing, tempo going, and do everything. Like even lullabies, if you have a wooden cradle, it moves a certain tempo. That means you have a fancy household, you can invest. Otherwise, most often with my grandmom's generation and their generation, especially during the drought, where people migrated from one place to
Yes.
another, doing construction work and being farm labor at random people's houses. When those things used to happen, all they had is a sari, and they used to tie it,
Right.
and they used to move it differently. The tempo of that is very different.
Mm,
So if you listen to the lullabies, what are you actually listening to?
mm,
In classical music, you will say idu tal. This is the tala. This is the raga. This is what time you have to sing it. That there are all these ideas that are here. Really, the environment is dictating all of that.
mm,
The environment, the objects, your resources, your identity, your placement, class wise, caste wise, all of that are dictating what you're singing. So what remains when that song comes to you? Of course, it's an immense treasure when I receive a song from my grandmother or anybody that I can make sense of and I can understand and I connect to. It's like really like it's appeared from somewhere. But now there is a difference to keeping it like a museum piece. Like when you go to a museum, there'll be a label. This is a grinding stone. It is not a grinding stone. It doesn't grind anything anymore. So are you going to be that person who collects that song and then makes a piece out of it and then
mm.
think of how to eternalize it? Or are you going to say, now this has to update to my lifestyle? This song comes from, say, 8 years ago. Now it comes from 2000. Now I have to make it 2020.
Mm,
When I pass it on, and I hope someone will update it too. So that's every song becomes a layer of history, a collective dream
mm,
that you get. You live it, you breathe it, you embody it, but you're also allowing other people to add to it, mess
mm.
with it. Yeah, and
True.
and not having any ownership of it.
Yeah.
Like you're only enjoying the fact that you're drawing from it and you're adding to it,
Mm,
and you will feel that ownership just because you are there in that circle, and you'll feel the certain number of students who've come to me and said, I want to learn this song, I want to do this work, I want to choreograph this piece. There is that obsession that you see in them, that you want to give every song that you have. It's like, please take it, do
Take it.
something.
Mhm.
I can only do so much. My mind could think of all those things that you're thinking. It'd be amazing, but you're the one who's thinking it, so it's your right to meddle with it, to mess with it. Would you like to write me a letter? Like, is there any copyright? No
Yeah.
point. Really, like, we have to get kids to stop thinking that way, you know. There's no original, there is no right, there's no wrong. I mean, music is music, and it has to cross that commercial barrier for sure for it to reach anywhere inside you.
I mean, it's been a constant tussle, I think, for any artist who creates and then, detaching from kind of an ego, or detaching from the part that, okay, I have created something, but once you start channeling it, and then there's nothing to claim as yours, and that's why it can travel to anybody, and whom similarly a thought or idea, whatever we learn, it's through each of our lived in experiences. I don't know how can we patent that, or how can we put a name to it. Somewhere we limit that knowledge to just that,
Yeah,
be that, and not be untouched, or to grow into something beautiful.
absolutely.
And this is amazing which you mentioned it. When with folk I can understand, because it has traveled through so many
Yeah.
ages. No,
When you suddenly say, I own it, like, that's really being full of yourself. Like, you
so
can't go beyond.
but how did like some like like Kabir Vani, they have he has managed to do it, and I think Rumi's poems have still live as his poems. So how does that? I think maybe it's more community involved. Is that the thing?
This is what I think has happened over time. I think when we first started creating music as humans, we've
Mm,
always created it for people, as a
mm,
gift to others and
others.
with others.
Mm,
Over time, whatever required, whatever was emphatic, whatever was successful, whatever was a great reaction, when the song really reacts to the certain idea or an event,
mm,
I feel the song grows.
mm,
I mean, it generally grows because more information gets added.
mm,
So there have been layers and layers of time where ownership as an idea has been brought up.
mm,
So first we see these geotags in the song. Okay,
mm,
even geotags are exactly doing that, saying that this
mm.
song is from Mudbi.
Would be
This
yeah.
song is from, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
if it, now it's this name and this person and this composer and this singer.
Mm,
Before, it used to be, this is from this village, this is
mm,
from this matha, this is. So
yeah.
even within these work songs, quite often these women would have gone to some bhajan mandali, they would have heard some songs, they would have come and started singing on the jobs that they do, and they restructure the song, and they would have
Mm,
restructured it to fit this activity.
right.
But so what I'm saying is, generally, I think within the songs, the important information used to go in.
Mm,
When at some point the person became important, the person also started going in. Sometimes willingly and knowingly, and sometimes unknowingly.
mm,
So vachanas actually means the said word. So a
mm,
lot of vachanas, be it Basavanna or Allama Prabhu or Akma Devi, not a lot of there is not a lot of proof that they wrote down these words.
mm,
What I'm trying to say is, generally, I over time, in human time, if you look at it, first we were not labeling anything. Slowly the labeling of names started with village names, then names of saints, then over time, in classical text, it becomes which person composed which raga at what time, for
mm,
what time. So it becomes more and more specific. I think it's human condition to leave more of an imprinting now than it
mm,
did before,
mm.
because life was so ephemeral, because there was less of written history.
Right.
Whatever you heard
Zora.
was true,
Yeah.
whatever you didn't hear didn't exist, and things moved on. But the more we've become a recorded, a civilization, we record what we do,
Yeah.
and it goes down in a certain way, in a certain narrative, in a certain perspective. So to clarify that, there is more and more information going into that.
Mm,
But it doesn't mean that this collectively owned music should not also continue.
true.
I think because there is recorded music, there has to be more ownership on our collective music,
Correct.
because that's where we are drawing from. Like when you see Dhi and Enjami, that new track that's come out. I love that. I love his opari in that song.
அஞ்சு மரம் வளர்த்து அழகான தோட்டம் வச்சு தோட்டம் செழித்தாலும் என் தொண்டை கடலே கரையே வனமே சனமே.
Because it connects the two worlds in my mind just listening to that song. There you don't really feel like he's extracting from somebody else's, he's not
Yes.
appropriating somebody else's art form. He's talking about his own grandmother and his own grandmother's garden in which these trees grow. It's so beautiful. Like, I think that's what we require right now. We need youngsters to figure out that we all come from very dense cultural histories. Each of us, like if five of us randomly came together and sat down in a cafe, we would probably be from five different corners of ideology from where we come from. And really we need to understand that that's what should build our pride, that we're so diverse, that can be unlimited lifelong sharing, and we'll still be fascinated by each other. We'll lose our biases about each other. We'll listen more to each other. We'll be better humans to each other. The world is also getting, why I think we are all slowly over the last 10 years trying to walk the road less traveled. Also, it's because things are so drastically changing around us, just not just political views, but the kind of disparity, the kind of hate for each other, the kind of insensitivity, the lynchings, the rapes. I mean, there's a lot happening. So I feel there needs to be more and more places of refuge where people can think straight and at least think for themselves and for their food and for their community and reconnect. Because God, the number of suicides that they've gone up, I mean, since the lockdown, you just don't know what to make of it. Like, how are we going to reach out in this climate? Like,
I think it is going to take time with all that is going on. There's a lot of wounds that is coming up, I think, in forefront, and pain and fear which comes from disconnection. I think that's the main at the heart of it all, where we're not able to feel so connected and that love of true bonding without judgments. And what you said is a space where we are celebrating diversity again in the true sense is something which is we should, and to just allow the other person to be with, means to hold that space within us and within others, to understand each other, what they are made up of, why, and also reflection, a lot of reflection. Why am I today like this, and what are my shadows, or why am I acting in a certain way, why is this triggering me? So those sort of inquiries, a healthy space for that to come on is, I think, somewhere that's only thing where our refuge is going to be, where there is music, where there is singing, making food. And would you like to sing another song, and just one more question, and we can
yeah, I will sing you something. This one is again, it's like a lullaby, but it's a performative lullaby. There are 4 mothers for Parshuraman. In certain regions there are 5, and there are 7 sometimes. They're basically the Saptakanyas. And when Renuka gives birth to Parshurama, he is such a Punda Parshurama. He is so unmanageable, that child. He requires 4 mothers to
take care of him.
Keep him calm and keep him rested. So this is what this is a song where 4 mothers, Satyamma, Bhagyamma, Renuka, and Ambabai, 4 of them are putting Parshurama to sleep. Tugtala jal vayyari, Anandamai tugtala jal vayyari, tugtala jal vayyari, Anandamai tugtala jal vayyari. Tugi tugi sappala daga Rama Malgyanawa, tugi tugi sappala daga Rama Malgyanawa, Gappane Rama Malgyanawa, Gappane Rama Malgyanawa, Gappane Rama Malgyanawa, Gappane Rama Malgyanawa, Teri Nalara Nalaragya Tera Kudi Nali Dadi Tuguaga Tugtala Jal Vayyari, Anandamai Tugtala Jal Vayyari, Tugtala Jal Vayyari, Anandamai ವಯ್ಯಾರಿ ನಾಲರ ಗೆಳತಿಯರ ಗೂಡಿ 4 friends got together and ನಲಿದಾಡಿ ತೂಗುವಾಗ all 4 of them together with happiness they are swinging this child. ತೂಗುತ್ತಾಳ ಜಾಲ ವಯ್ಯಾರಿ. Jala is like Maya Jala, this web of Maya Jala. All 4 of them are going to weave for him. They're like not just putting him to sleep, they're creating the world for him. They're creating this world for him. And that's such a powerful, I mean, it's not even a lullaby. I'm thinking it's like an exaltation of the mothers more than this child, you know. There's one verse in this. It's a long song, so I'll sing you one more verse. Angai amba mani olaga tinga vemba twatila katti. Angai is hand, hasta. Linga is lingam. Twattila katti. Linga vemba twattila katti. So the house is like my palm. If my palm were a house, the linga is the cradle in that house. Angai amba mani olaga linga vemba twattila katti. Angai amba mani olaga linga vemba twattila katti. Linga vemba twattila katti. Linga vemba twattila katti. Devi nalara ನಾಲರ ಗೆಳತಿಯರ ಕೂಡಿ ನಲಿದಾಡಿ ತೂಗುವಾಗ ತೂಗುತ್ತಾಳ ಜಾಲ ವಯ್ಯಾರಿ ಆನಂದಮಾಯಿ ತೂಗುತ್ತಾಳ ಜಾಲ ವಯ್ಯಾರಿ. This one's one of my favorite songs that they sing in Ballari, the Jogatis that we learned this from. And it's just like that. It's such a fun song. Like, it's actually a disco number.
Absolutely.
Also, it's got these 4 super women mothers who are weaving the world for Parshuna.
Love a buland awaz. Lovely. You was talking about weaving the world and just imagining that we are weaving a world too, and you know, that's why it's called, you know, if it is called Durga Lokam, and there are 2 intentions, Shilpa, you can put in, one for yourself and one for the world, and what it would be.
The intention I have, I'll start with myself because I've been thinking a lot about what I need to do in this world. So I think for me, my intentions are that I need to be running a space soon which invites people, which invites music, which invites folk artists where they feel at home. Not really that they're coming to a venue or a festival space or a performance space, but they're coming to their daughter's home or their sister's home. I want a space like that where they feel at home to come and stay and share, and feel the need to transfer those art forms that they have to the younger generation. And the intention to the world is that we have to start listening to each other. It's probably the most underrated skill there is in the world. We've stopped listening. We've just, and also as listeners, I think we've become more passive listeners. We're not active listeners. We're more critical listeners. We're not empathetic listeners. We are reductive listeners. We're not expansive listeners. I just generally feel like that's what we need for the world. We need to listen to each other as countries, as cultures, and build happier engagements, build more sustainable engagements with each other. That's the intention, that we stop otherizing and give space for voice and listening. That's the intention. I hope it reaches a few people and few hearts and few minds.
Amazing. It's all, so be it, tathastu. You put it out there, I'm sure it'll flow through you, flow through the world around you. Thank you so much for your time, for your singing.
Just having this conversation, I definitely hope we continue this conversation when you come and visit us.
Yes.
And you're definitely going to love making vlogs from there. So
Yeah.
please come someday and we shall see you and we shall
Sure.
take care.
Take
and
care.
I shall catch up.
Yeah. See you. Bye.
Gappane Rama Maligyanova Devi Na